To start the shell, you're going to have Anton completely assembled like so. So if you have not sewn all of his parts on yet, please go do that. It's going to make your life so much easier. And then head back and we'll start. So what you're going to need for the shell is 3 colors. I've chosen a light blue, a medium blue, and a darker blue, but you can also do this in one color, in more colors. It's totally up to you. There's a lot of customization options here because we're just making a long flat panel, so do as many or as few colors as you like. You'll need a crochet hook. I used a 3mm and a tapestry needle. I really like this long one that I got from Michaels, but if you don't have one like this, you can also use a regular size tapestry needle. It's going to work just fine. You'll need a pair of scissors, as well as some sewing pins. And I totally forgot to include this while I was filming, but you also need a flexible tape measure. That is going to be very helpful. Now, before we actually get started with the crocheting part, we have to do a couple of things, and one of those is to place pins on the side of Anton's body between about rounds 12 and 13, kind of centered between the legs. So the pin should sit kind of level with the eyes and the tail in between the legs on the body. So take a moment to just put one pin on each side, because this is going to be where our shell attaches, and it's going to help us measure the length, or really the width of the shell that we need to make for Anton. Then, the next step, we need to grab our flexible tape measure, and we're going to measure vertically around Anton, like basically from the head to the tail and around. So I'll show you how to do this. We're going to be essentially squishing Anton's head and tail down towards his feet to curl him into a ball. So you can kind of squish him a little bit before we measure. You're going to grab your flexible tape measure, and what I do is I kind of hold it on the belly, and then I use my left index finger to hold the head down while I wrap the tape measure over the head, down the back, and up the tail. This is very important, like don't go around the tail. And then we're going to see where our measurement lines up. And so mine's right at about 11 inches, but that is with me holding them pretty tight, like curling the head and tail down a lot. So I think I'm going to relax that down to 12 inches. And I think that'll give me a little bit more flexibility. It'll be easier to roll them into a ball. So that is something to take into account when you're measuring. If you're holding it really, really tight, you might want to loosen up just a little bit because it'll make the shell a little easier to play with later. Write this number down and keep it handy. Now we're going to start crocheting the shell, and we are going to need to reference it when we decide on the length. Now that all the prep work is out of the way, we can start with the fun part, the crocheting. So to begin, we're going to chain 26. Once you have your chain, we're going to take Anton and we're going to measure to make sure the width looks good. So line one end of your chain up on the side of the body where the first pin is, wrapping horizontally across the body, and to line up with the chain, with the pin on the other side. And you shouldn't be pulling your chain super tight, but it also shouldn't be super loose. It should just rest comfortably on the back of the body. If it is too tight, consider adding a couple of chains. If it's too loose, take a couple out. There is no stitch multiple for this, so literally whatever amount of chains is going to wrap comfortably across Anton's body. Just measure that first before moving on. So row 1, we're starting in the second chain from the hook and back loop single crocheting across. And then row 2 is a single crochet across row, and we're repeating these 2 rows over and over again until we reach the length that we took earlier. So I've been working several rows of the shell so far, and I hit right at about 4 inches with my first color. And because I'm doing 2 more colors, I want to switch now to my medium blue, just checking that it does measure 4 inches, and it does. So when you're changing colors, I highly recommend changing them on the single crochet across row. It'll give you a better transition. So I just worked my back loop single crochet row, So I'm taking out that final stitch so that I can change colors. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and now drop that first color, and we're going to pick up the second color and pull through to finish the single crochet. Now chain one with the new color, and then work your single crochet across row. I like to work over my yarn tails across the back. You don't have to do this, but it helps when you go to weave them in later, so because they're already kind of secured, and it'll keep the edges kind of tight. So that's what I do. In order to reach the length that I measured earlier for my Anton, I did about 88 rows, and just double checking that it does measure 12 inches, and it does. So this is totally up to you, like depending on the type of yarn and everything that you used, you might have a bigger or a smaller panel. Just check everything against that measurement that you took. That's what's the most important. Once your panel is complete, go ahead and fasten off with a fairly long yarn tail. And now we're going to cinch the sides of the shell to get them ready to put on Anton. And to do this, we're going to take our tapestry needle and we're going to weave in and out of the stitches or the sides of the rows all the way up the long side of the panel. So you're going to do this all the way to the other side. Okay, so I've gotten to the other side, and now we're going to stop here because we do not want to continue across the short side at all. We're just stopping on this long side. So go ahead and pull the yarn through, and then we are going to pull the yarn tight to kind of cinch that side closed. Now just be careful if you're using kind of a delicate yarn not to pull so hard that you snap it. So just kind of gently pull until the side is kind of cinched down. So far you should have something that looks like this. To continue, we're going to go back to where we started, where the yarn tail was fastened off, and we're going to insert our tapestry needle, and we're going to weave in and out of the sides of the rows again. This time we're going in a circular direction, so you can see how I'm doing this right here. This creates a little hole, and how we're going to close it is we're going to just keep weaving in and out in a circle all the way around, pulling tight as we go, and that is eventually going to cinch the hole closed. So don't be worried if you have to go around and around several times. Like I said, don't be too harsh and snap your yarn. If you just keep weaving in and out around, it will close the hole. It just may take a little bit, and especially if you're using bigger, chunkier yarn, it may take a couple of rounds before it closes up. So this is what you should have when you have the hole completely cinched closed. And just to take note that this is the inside, the flat side, and then the outside is the side of the panel with the unworked front loops. Before we fully cinch the other side, we are going to attach that first cinch point to Anton, right where we have the pin from earlier. So this shell, if you're doing different colors like I do, this is reversible. If you want, like I want the light blue to be towards the head, but if you wanted to have like the darker color towards the head, you could. That actually makes no difference. So whichever end you want to be the front can be the front. But what we're going to do is pull that cinch point down so that it lines up with that pin. That is the only spot that we're going to sew to the body is that cinch point. So use a couple of sewing pins to hold that cinch point in place. Then we're going to use our tapestry needle to sew the cinch point of the shell to the body. Make sure to sew this pretty securely. You always want to sew parts on securely, but the shell, because it is essentially a moving part, you want to kind of do a little bit of overkill with the sewing. So go a couple more times for good measure, tie a few more knots, And then once you're satisfied, go ahead and weave in the tail end of the body. Once you have this sewn on, we are going to move to the other side of the shell and cinch it closed. And I know this looks crazy right now, but if you actually cinch both sides of the shell before you put it on Anton, it's actually very difficult to assemble. So trust the process. Now we're going to cut a length of color C, or whatever color you used for your shell, and do the same thing starting at one end. Weave in and out of the sides of the rows until you reach the other end of the panel and start cinching it closed. Once you have the second side of the shell cinched up and that hole closed, now we're going to finish up Anton by sewing that cinched point to the other pinned part of the body. So don't be shy, like squish Anton's body up into the shell and pull it down tight, and then use a couple of sewing pins to hold it in place. And you do want to double check the placement just to make sure everything's even and level before you finally take your tapestry needle and sew that cinch point to the body. And that's it. That's how you make Anton the Armadillo. I hope you love doing this. And now you can even roll him into a ball, tuck his ears and his tail in, and pull the shell down over his head, like so. And there you have it. You have your very own Anton the Armadillo. So I love this project so much. I hope you enjoyed this pattern and this tutorial. If you ever have any questions about one of my patterns, just go ahead and contact me. Everything is in the description box below. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.